So a quick recap a little bit on the type of discount rate that you can introduce in Nakisa. As you know, you can have the implicit rate or the incremental borrowing rate. So in case you have financial lease, especially for vehicles or for equipment, where the implicit rate is provided by the lessor, and based on your internal policies, you probably will be using that. In a lot of other situations, most likely you'll be using the incremental borrowing rate, and especially as we are talking about type of operational leases, real estate leases, this is what you will be using the incremental borrowing rate. It's very important also that you consider some of the switches that we have in the back end, in the admin page, in the manager page, especially the switch related to enable, disable automatic IBR selection. So if the implicit rate is 0, you want the system to consider the incremental borrowing rate. And for the implicit rate, in the accounting section of the contract, this is the placeholder where you enter it. Remember, it's a numerical field. You don't need to enter any special symbol. You don't need to do anything else. And you have about four digits that are visible. If ever you have rate with more than four decimals, this is possible to be uploaded through the contract upload feature. For the IBR, as you are using IBR in this particular section, the contract rate will remain 0, and based on the switch, the system is going to consider the IBR. That will be done at activation group level. So once you do that, as you are coming back to the accounting section, you will see the incremental borrowing rate will appear. You will have the correspondent rate in there. Some other things to consider: where exactly are those discount rates in the back end? You might remember, especially for incremental borrowing rate, that is defined at the company code level. So you have it specific for each company, and you can define that in the configuration. As you know, there are several dimensions to consider for the IBR. So the length of the term, valid to, valid from, and also we have the you have the possibility of creating IBRs by each asset class. In that case, you might want to consider the switch use asset class IBR determination. We went over these details in one of our previous sessions, if I remember correctly, back in December, because with our latest version that we had, we introduced the ability to upload IBR in mass, and just wanted you to have a refresher before we presented the new features. But I just wanted to go through all this as we are diving into today's subject, which is actually modify the discount rate. So you can modify the discount rate through a lease event, a separate lease event just for that, but also you can update, you can modify either the contract rate or the IBR through another event. This is also very related to how your internal policy is. Yes.
Catalina, there's some background noise in the office.
I'm gonna switch my place. Let me get to another place. I'm very sorry about this.
Yeah, no problem.
But if you are using an implicit rate, this is where you will be introducing the contract rate itself. And if you leave it to 0, based on the setting, normally you will be asked to switch to IBR. So this is the first step where with every event, you will find that. And if you leave that field 0 as it was shown in the previous step, then the system is going to consider the IBR. And as you are moving to the send to assessment, you will have this update IBR, which is by default and is already set up. So you will have your rate in the schedule. Similarly, if you're performing a reassessment, so you perform an event starting from the activation group level, where you change a term from likely to exercise or the other way around, you have also this option of modifying contract rate. If you wanna move from implicit rate to IBR in a similar situation, if you leave 0 for the send to assessment step, you will be required to update the IBR. And once you do that, as before, the system is going to take into consideration the incremental borrowing rate that was available for that day, for that remaining term, and if ever you're using the asset class determination for the particular asset class. There are some things to remember, and in the first topic that Hailey presented, she mentioned that for the decrease in this term, you should not be updating the IBR or changing the implicit rate. This is because there are certain events where you don't want to have, you don't want to perform multiple changes at the same time. And then for the decrease in list term, and if you remember, we have also decrease in asset value, and this is something that we'll be presenting in future session. The system is considering the asset and the liability separately. For that reason, you don't want to perform at the same time a change in interest rate, but if you need to, you can have a subsequent event, a different event, but in the same period. The reason is that every change in interest rate, whether it's implicit or IBR, should be triggering an equal adjustment for both the asset and the liability. This is the reason that you don't want to perform that with a decrease in list term. We introduce here the type of events where you can have this update, and there are certain events for which the update IBR is checked by default, and there are others where it's unchecked. And of course, as you are using mainly IBR, keeping the IBR update or not is a choice for the user. Only when you are changing from implicit to IBR, the system is pointing you to use the IBR. But keep in mind, you have enough flexibility to make the right choice. There are certain events, as I was mentioning, and you saw it before, the decrease in this term, where you cannot make that, and it's not because it's a missing ability. It's because it's the right thing to do, and you can do that through a subsequent event. We're going to pass to see an example, and we're going to go through some steps in the application itself, but I wanted to know if there are any questions, any comments related to this topic so far. Right, let's move to the application, and I hope you can still see my screen. Can you see the application?
Yes.
All right. So let me give you a quick tour of this contract. So this is a contract that has an implicit rate, and I hope you can see it here. It's an implicit rate of 2%. And in the terms and condition, we have a simple base run, not a complicated scenario. I just wanted to use it as a base for our discussion on updating the implicit rate over the IBR. So we're going to perform a couple of scenarios, and if we don't have time, this is a larger topic that we would like to present in some other session. So I do hope that you will give us some feedback so we can provide you with some more targeted, some more specific examples. So I am at the contract level, and if I perform a lease modification. So as you know, the amendment date, first of all, has no implication whatsoever on the calculation. It's just an indication of when the event is performed. You will fill this in. I can leave today's date is perfectly fine, but you can put, like, for example, the 1st of July, it will have the same effect as well. In the reason code, you might remember we have a specific term. So if you need to do only the change in contract rate, this is the reason code to select, but you can modify the contract rate through any other term. So you have the modified contract rate that is checked by default in here. If you are using IBR, if you check modify contract rate or you uncheck it, it will not have any impact. But as in this contract, I'm using implicit rate, this will have an impact. So let's see what are the options here. First of all, if I uncheck it, modify contract rate, and I'm submitting, as the system is creating the draft, you will see there is no change in my contract rate in the accounting section of the contract, but more relevant for me to check the changes that are happening is at the all column schedule level. So that's where we are going to check. So that point of validation is the one that is the most relevant. So if I'm going to the accounting section here, I can see that I have the contract rate. It remained 2%, nothing happened. So normally at this point, I would go to the list component level and I will make my change in terms. So let's say I'm adding a supplemental. I'm not giving, I don't want to go through a more complex scenario because the point of this presentation was about the interest rate. So I'm going with this, and let's say we are adding one supplementer for 1 month, nothing very complicated. So this is what I'm adding here. Now, as I'm moving to the approval, I'm sending to approval, I'm approving this, all this very fast just to get here to send to assessment. Based on the rules for effective day, my effective day should be on or before the start of my term. So I'm going to go with the 1st of July posting date. As Hailey was also mentioning, it depends on your periods that are open and also on the rules that you have, depending on whether or not you're connected. So all I want to see is the schedule. So this is the most important validation that you can do with all the events that you are performing. You want to make sure that the change to the interest rate has been performed or not. As you know, independent of whether you're using an implicit rate or an IBR, this is the section where you will see the information, the effective interest rate monthly and daily. And you can see here, I have my green line, my event, but the interest rate hasn't changed. So this is the indication that, in fact, I haven't changed anything to my interest rate. So I can quickly delete this draft to look into another scenario. Here's my draft. Delete draft. All right. Lease modification, same date, new terms, and I'm choosing to change my contract rate. Once again, numerical value. You don't need to add any symbols whatsoever. I'm clicking submit, and the expectation here is that when the system is creating the draft for me in the accounting, I will see the file. So this is where I can check that. Of course, I'm moving to the list component to add the terms that I wanted to add. So we are going to do the same. We are adding a supplemental very quickly here. I'm going again with the 1st of July. It's gonna be for 1 month. And we are performing the workflow approval. And let's send to assessment, choosing the 1st of July. And I can even leave the posting date to today, assuming that July is open. All I want to check is the schedule. Once again, the most important validation, and I'm stressing on that, like independent of all the other steps that you make before, unless you include the validation of the schedules in some shape or form, all the validation that we can introduce will be muted. So this has to be a practice for the users to check the old column. So what I'm expecting to see here, of course, I added the supplemental, so in payments, I should be seeing that. But as I'm checking the interest rate, I can see that with my green line, I have a change in my interest rates. And of course, as I'm using the compounding frequency monthly, my effective interest rate is different from my nominal, the nominal rate, the one I introduced at contract level. And I can see the changes made. And of course, what I'm seeing here in the deltas is a combined change. It's based on the supplemental that I added, but also the interest rate. As you know, the interest rate and the present value calculation, they go in different directions. So as I'm increasing the interest rate, I see a decrease in present value calculation and the other way around. So in here, it's a combination of the two factors, but the increase from supplemental was higher than my decrease from the rate. And we have 5 minutes left, so I have time for one last case. So I'm just going to delete this draft really quickly. Yeah, and now we are going to get back to the contract level and form a lease modification where we are, in fact, forcing the system to choose the IBR. Once again, the amendment date, it's going to be for today. Keep in mind, this has no implication on calculation. As I'm here and I'm leaving modified contract rate and I'm leaving 0. And the switch in the back for me is always use IBR when contract rate is 0. You can have that off. And I know some of you have some situation in which you want to use the contract rate 0. But those are very, very specific situations. So make sure that you have the right switches in the back. Make sure that you have the right choice in the front end. So I'm in this situation where I'm saying modify contract rate and leaving the field to 0. I have my draft here. So of course, my expectation as I'm going into the accounting is that I'm seeing 0 over here. And of course, I'm performing once again the addition of my term. I'm going to go with the same, a supplemental of 100 in the month of July. It's going to be for 1 month. And we are moving through the workflow process. We approve. And we are going to the activation group. We are checking likely to exercise, and you are going to see here, different from the other two scenarios. First of all, I have my update IBR. So it appears here I have my IBR. So I can check now the effective date, and I'm choosing a posting date, and I'm clicking on submit. And I'm going to see the schedules. Once again, the validation part, which is the most important, especially with the complexity of cases that we have. I'm looking for my green line. I see my supplemental here, but I'm scrolling to see the interest rate section. So once again, similar to before, I made a change. Now I kind of force the system to use the IBR, and I can see the system is moving from what it was before the implicit rate to something to 1.2, the IBR, and of course, with the same compounding frequency, the effective discount rate is calculated. As I'm going to the delta, I am going to see an increase, and this increase is higher than the 100 that I added because I added one supplement that is payable in this particular period. The delta is 100. The rest, the 9.94, is coming from the change in interest rate. Remember what I was saying, the movements in discount rate are in opposite direction with the present value calculation. So we decrease the discount rate, but we can see an increase affecting the liability and the asset. So I covered all the possible scenarios going from a contract with implicit rate, but we are going to go in we're going to see the opposite coming from a contract with IBR next time. So we'll be continuing with this topic. We are at the time, and if you have other questions or comments, please direct them to me and to Mario. And as always, we thank you so much for always coming at this session, at this workshop, and we do hope that it adds value to what you're doing and it's useful in your day-to-day process and operation.